We have the coilovers installed, and there's a couple loose ends that we still have to do, which is to set the ride height and to install the adjustable drop links. And to me, they kind of fall under the heading of settings and tuning, so that's why they're in this video. Setting the ride height is kind of more a personal preference thing. I mean, there are constraints, obviously, with the coilovers. I can't get so low where the tire interferes with the fender or the fender liners. You can also get the geometry so extreme that even though we have adjustable drop links, you may even have to go to like adjustable control arms, things like that. I mean, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a practical drop in the OEM ride height. Something that makes the car kind of look lowered, but not extreme where I have to worry about function. The Ohlins coilovers, if you follow the factory specs, should lower the car about 20 millimeters, and then they have a tolerance of 10. So you could be at 30 or you could be at 10. My thought was I want to go like an inch anyway, so that's 25 millimeters. So I'm going to probably use their factory spec, and we already kind of measured that when we put the coilovers on. But I think I'm going to go even lower to start with, and we'll put the wheels on, we'll lower the car, and we'll take a look, and we'll just adjust from there. So let's start that now. I'm looking forward to this because I'm hoping when I'm done, I'm going to take the car out and at least get a feel for this new suspension. And by the way, it's 8 degrees outside, so nice to be in a warm garage that I can do this. So anyway, let's get to that and we'll continue on. So we just have to remove this side of the drop link. We've already done the other side, which is the lower strut mount. So we've got a 17 we want to put on this side. And this is 16. This is the adjustable drop link right here. So we're going to put this side on right now. And before we tighten it, we'll go up top and look at the mount for the bottom of the strut, this side here. Here's the drop link. What we've got to do is get it right here. You can see it's too short. It's I can lower the carrier, but I can also raise up this adjustable link. This just had to keep coming down. There we go. Now, as I tighten this bolt, what I'll do is I'll be pinching on the coilover and securing the coilover position. So what I want to do is get my ride height first, then I'm going to tighten this assembly up here, and that'll lock in the coilover. I've tightened the bottom drop link bolt that goes to the sway bar, and the top now will lock in our ride height. Okay, so let's take a look at this. What I'm going to do is raise the wheel carrier with the jack until I get it to the point that I'm shooting for. And see if you can see this, because we're on a tripod here. But this is printed from the web, because the manual that came with coilovers was dated 2012. I had read that on the web somewhere that they're shipping with an older version. So you want to use the newer version online, and these dimensions are actually a little different. So what they're calling for, we're at the front left, so driver's side, 309 millimeters from the top of the mount, the strut mount, to this lock ring, which will set the height. All right, 309 millimeters, that's 12.17 inches. So I want to actually maybe even start out a little less than that, because I want to be a little lower than the target that they have. So I'm going to round that down to a little over 12 inches. So let's see where we're at right now with that lock ring. Okay, so that lock ring is around 12 1/4. That's 12 1/4. Okay, so let's go to 12 1/8. Okay. Okay, so we're going to raise the wheel carrier and get it up to this point. And just FYI, 12 1/8 is 307 millimeters. So they're calling for 309. So we're very close. I'm going to probably lengthen the drop link as I need to as we go up here. Okay, we're tightening the drop link here. This is 63 foot-pounds. Okay, everything's buttoned up. It's tightened to torque spec, and just a quick look at this. And looking at these lengths, now I did 12 1/8 instead of this 309. I'm like 307. And instead of 195 between the top of the spring and the bottom, I've got 196. So the preload is right in the ballpark. Length is just a tad shorter than what they spec here. The last thing we need to do is to adjust the length of the drop link. Now, my understanding is that you want to have no preload on the sway bar when the car is sitting on the ground. So that's difficult to make an adjustment when the car's on the ground, because you got to get in here and turn this center piece right here. So what I've done is I've used my jack stands and I've raised the wheel carrier almost to the point where it's lifting off of the two-post lift. So I'm simulating that it's on the ground, or pretty close anyway. And what I'm going to do is just spin this to kind of the most neutral point, which is about right there. You can see I can just spin it with my hand pretty freely. And I'll now lock that in with my lock nuts. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Now, it's not critical that I get this perfect, because this will all be adjusted when it goes in for an alignment and corner balance. I just want to get myself in the ballpark so that I can drive it, test it, and not have any issues when, you know, just driving to the shop. So anyway, let me do that for both sides, then we're going to move to the back. Alright, we're in the back of the car. The fronts are done. If you remember the first video, we installed these rear coilovers. We left a couple loose ends. We didn't do the drop links, and we didn't really position this bracket. We talked about the ability to slide it up and down and maybe not use adjustable drop links, but I've decided I'm going to use the spec that Ohlins is calling for, which is 66 millimeters from this top lock ring and down to the top of the stabilizer. So that's 2.67 inches. So I put a pair of calipers on there, and I tightened the Allen screws to 12 Newton meters, which they call for. So that's in position. You can see the sway bar is not dangling, and the reason why is because I put the other side on. Now everything's loose. I just kind of test fit, and so that swivels the sway bar up. Okay, so you could see the drop link there. Did the same thing. I jacked up the wheel carrier, kind of compressed the suspension as if it was on the ground. Then I tried to find as neutral a point as I could so there really wasn't any preload on the sway bar. So we're done with that. Okay, so I've got the wheels on the car. I'm ready to drop it so that we can look at the stance. The top is still kind of in the service position. So let me put that down. I've got to close the hood. And then we'll lower it and we'll take a look at what we got. I've let the car settle overnight. I rolled it back and forth and it's been sitting in one place now. And I'm going to take some measurements and then we'll make some changes. But you can see it's definitely lower. In fact, it almost was a problem getting the supports out from underneath the car. I mean, it's actually okay. It's not like I would need to lift the car to get those under. But they kind of rubbed, whereas before there was plenty of clearance. As I pull the arms back, it kind of rubbed on the support of the frame. So it's certainly lower, and I think the rears are a little too low. And the fronts may be good, or they might be a little high. But let's take a look at how we measure, or how we're going to go about measuring this. Now here's the table that we're going to use for our measurements. You know, a lot of people will take a tape measure and go from the ground up to the fender, and that's certainly a way to do it. But this way I can really zero in on my target, which is the X74 suspension, or yeah, the X74 suspension ride height. So if you look at this table, this is a Porsche table. They have it with both the 17 and 18-inch wheels, and they have the different optional suspensions, and here's the X74 column. So we have 18-inch wheels. We're going for 118 millimeters, and their tolerance is 10 millimeters. For rear, we've got 133. Now, they have recommended measuring points, and here in the front, if you look at this diagram, that's actually the mounting bolt that we had to remove to replace the control arm. So we're familiar with that bolt. We just take a measurement from there to the ground, and we should get 118 millimeters. And that would simulate that ride height of an X74, which is a little over an inch lower than stock. For the rear, they're referring to this point here on the subframe to the ground. I'm not familiar with that. We'll have to get under the car and look. But let's start with the fronts, okay? So what I did was I cut a tie wrap to 118 millimeters. So I'm going to go in there and place this on this bolt and see how close I am to the ground. All right, we've got the light on. I've got my tie wrap here, and it's sitting on the ground. And as you can see, the car is too low. It's lower than that X74 spec that we're shooting for. So I'm going to go over to the other side and take a look at that measurement, and then I'll try to come up with an idea of what I need to do to increase the length of the coilover to get to where I want. All right, hopefully you can see this, but it looks like it's also too low on this side, not quite as low as the other side. For the rear, I think it's easier to show you what's going on this way than under the car. So I cut my tie wrap to length. I went under and tried to measure from this locating bore that they're suggesting. And there's no way that that can be correct, because I'm getting, you know, the car is like 1.5 inches lower than it should be if you measure from there using that measurement, which is already a very low measurement. And I mean, you can see the car is lowered, but it's not unusually so. And the other thing, I mean, just as a sanity check, I put a tape measure from the ground to the fender, and I'm getting like 25, a little less than 25 1/4. So if I go by the measurement of that diagram, I'd be at 24 1/4 or less, and that just wouldn't be the case. So here's my thought. I think there was a mistake here, and rather than measure from that point, I think maybe, you know, the reference was this circle, and the measurement should have been taken over here, because when I do that, I am too low, but not much, probably, you know, a few millimeters. So I'm going to use that as a reference, and then I'll also use the fender to ground measurement too. But okay, so I do need to raise the car, and I do need to readjust these coilovers. So let me get to that. So here's the lock nut, which I've gotten out of our way. So my plan is to spin this whole shaft and extend the length of the coilover. I made a mark with a Sharpie right there. I'm not sure if you can see it, but my plan is to watch that rise up to a point where I've got, it's going to be about 0.22 inches. I've got it on my calipers. Once it's up high enough, I'll take my calipers and bring it over. So that's the plan. So here, let me see if you can watch that inner shaft. You can see it spinning. Let's see that Sharpie come around. See, it's already gone up. Let's take a quick look at this. I'm going to do another revolution or two. Okay, so I just went through, I lowered the fronts, which I think is visible. It does look a little lower. And I raised the back, which is definitely visible. Now I'm right on target with my front measurement compared to the X40, so my tie wrap is perfect. And then from the ground is like 25 1/4, something like that. And the back, because I don't have a confident measuring point, because like I said, the one in that diagram just doesn't work. You know, if I use that right now, I'd be way too low, and it's obviously not too low. So, so I'm just going by the ground, and I'm a tad over 25 1/4. So I'm actually going to take it out for a drive. Okay, here's an outdoor shot. Maybe you can see the stance a little better. It's definitely lowered, and whether it'll stay exactly where it is, I'm not sure. But for now, I like it. Alright, I'm on my first drive here. Mostly I'm just listening for noises and stuff. I did kind of push it a little ways back, and it definitely drives flatter for sure, and turn-in definitely is noticeably different. I've got the settings for compression, or the you know, the damping, at 9 in the front, 10 in the back. And honestly, I think I need to go looser, because we have bad roads around here, and not so much this one, but I've taken it on some rougher roads, and it actually got kind of crashy, you know, not unlike the stock suspension. I think it probably could use a little bit more stroke, and you know, with the damping settings relatively high, it might be kind of hitting the wall with the damping. further through the stroke. And also the spring preload, I'm not certain I've got that exactly where it should be, and that could be played with as well. So, you know, maybe getting more spring involved in the suspension could be a good thing. So when I'm hitting, you know, square edge bumps and holes and irregularities, rather than have the damping kind of do all the work, maybe by bumping up the spring preload, then the spring can take some of that force and, you know, spread it out so they're both working together. Obviously, it's going to take some time to sort things out. I've decided to wrap the video up at this point because we've just had some pretty nasty weather. We received some snow. We've got another storm in the forecast, then another snow event after that. So I wanted to get the car into the shop for the alignment and corner balance, but realistically, it's going to be a while before I can get that done. I don't want to drive the car on bad roads. It's clean, and I hate washing cars, especially in the winter. And there's no need, so I'm just going to keep it in the garage till the roads are clear. And then once I make that appointment and get that done, I also want to play with the damping settings and kind of zero in on the ride and performance that I'm looking for. So that's all going to take time. So rather than delay this video, I wanted to finalize it, and we'll have a fourth video when the time comes. But we did get to see the final installation of the coilovers. We got to see the car now that it sits on coilovers. It's with a lowered stance. We got a brief drive. So that's it for now, and we'll have that fourth video come out soon.